Hello and welcome to another episode of The Three Techs. I'm your host, Tony Tang, and I'm joined by my co-host tonight, Bob Fairbairn. Hey, Bob.
Good evening, Tony.
Today, I wanted to talk about a video that we previously did and was fairly popular. It was about the RØDECaster Pro review, and I also wanted to follow up on the PodMic, which is what we're recording on today, because we had some issues with it in our video of that. We'll provide links to those that you can watch if you haven't seen those already. And I thought we'd also go through the Firmware 2 update that RØDE just recently announced.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And we also have some questions that were brought up by some of our viewers. And what do you say,
Okay.
Bob?
Sounds good. That new firmware is really interesting.
Let's get into some of the questions. One of the comments that you guys told us about was just about the background noise and the noise gate and how that didn't sound good with the noise gate opening and closing on the RØDECaster Pro. Well, that was a combination of a bunch of things. One, I had some background fan noise going on, which I do have some tonight with the computer fan. I can hear it revving up pretty hot because we are doing a lot with it. But I was also using a condenser microphone. That was the AKG C414,
yeah.
which is a pretty sensitive microphone, so it picks up a lot of that room noise. And I think if you were to use a dynamic microphone like the RØDE PodMic here, you might not pick up as much of that noise. Now, if you listen carefully with headphones, Bob, I don't know if you hear it or not, you might be able to hear the noise gate operating, opening and closing, and some of that noise coming in and out. Do you hear any of that?
Very little, hardly at all.
Okay.
From here.
Well, and that's the thing that when you switch over to a dynamic microphone, I think that's going to help a lot with the background noise and eliminate some of that so that when you are using the noise gate, it won't sound as obvious. The other thing is that I wanted to point out in the firmware that we reviewed, the ducking feature was available on all of the channels. So if you don't remember what ducking is, that is under advanced settings, and what that does is it will allow the host to basically speak over other guests if everybody is talking all at once, because sometimes if you get a lively crowd of guests, it's hard to hear the host. But whenever the host talks, that will automatically duck or lower all of the guest inputs.
You mean I can't interrupt you anymore?
No, you can't, Bob. Stop that. So you can see on channel 1, I have ducking enabled, and the switch is right there. If I switch over to channel 2, ducking is not there. 3 doesn't have it. 4 doesn't have it. If I were to switch to the USB, smartphone, and Bluetooth, those don't have it either. So ducking is something that you can only switch on for the host input 1 channel.
Yeah, got it.
Makes sense. Cool. The other thing that I've heard people talk about is just this locking power plug. And you can kind of see it at the very top there. I've got this little screw lock at the top there that prevents the DC power cord from accidentally coming unplugged from the RØDECaster Pro.
Ah, okay.
I don't know why some people aren't getting that, but I happened to order this as a demo unit from one of the resellers, and so maybe it was a special unit or something that came with those locking plugs. The other thing, though, that is different now is that the RØDECaster Pro now supports internal multi-track recording to the micro SD card. If you remember, it could do multi-track recording to a computer through the USB cable.
Right.
But now you can just do it, standalone without a computer and directly record a polywave file for a multi-track wave file internally on the micro SD card.
Okay.
So that's kind of nice. So you can go completely PC free and just bring the RØDECaster Pro and have all the benefits of multi-track recording.
Okay. And that's a single file with all the tracks in it? Is that what it's doing?
Correct. Yeah, that's why I think they call it a polywave file. What the file contains is all the different tracks. You're going to get the stereo master file, which is left and right of all the sum of all the channels and the playback pads mixed together.
Okay.
You're also going to get mono tracks for inputs 1 through 4. You also get stereo for the USB, stereo for the phone, stereo for the Bluetooth.
Okay.
As well as a track.
That's a lot of data.
Yeah, as well as stereo for the playback pads as well. So that's a lot of tracks in a single file.
Okay.
And that's why it's really important, too, that you choose a quality micro SD card. And RØDE has that information for some of the cards that they've tested on their website. Definitely make sure you're using a good quality micro SD card if you plan on doing internal multi-track recording with the RØDECaster Pro.
Yeah, that's a lot of bits per second.
Yeah. So those were the questions and some of the updates from the last time we did our RØDECaster Pro review video. If you haven't checked that out yet, go ahead and check that out. We'll put a link to it in the description. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the update to the PodMic. Now, if you watched our review video on that, I was getting this electrical hum. And it's the first thing I noticed when I plugged it in and I listened to it through headphones, is that my other mic didn't have any of that, but when I plugged into the PodMic, it had this buzzing noise, which I kind of identified as this 60 hertz hum from the electrical systems that we have here in North America. In other countries, it's 50 hertz, so it might be slightly different. But what I thought I'd do, Bob, is just turn up the gain on the PodMic so that you could hear it, because I know that last time you couldn't hear it. It's at 40 now, the maximum's 55, so I think that's going to add about 15 dB of gain. So I'll just be silent so that you could hear that noise again with the replacement mic that I got.
Yeah, it's low, but it's definitely there. Now you got a lot of gain in there, but it's definitely there.
I don't want to call out the mic too much on that because, like you said, I did have to apply a lot of gain in order for it to be very audible and noticeable. Maybe if you're doing a podcast, you're using the noise gate and it's going on and off, you won't hear it as much. But if that is something that you think might bother you, I think that's something you should know about, is that especially if you have sources of electromagnetic interference around you.
You don't have any electrical stuff around you, do you?
No, Bob. What are you talking about? I actually did kind of go around the house and hold the microphone up to different electrical cables, lights, switches, and compared it with other microphones that I had. And the PodMic definitely did have a much louder, more pronounced electrical hum when it was near those sources of electromagnetic interference.
But the thing is I don't hear it now. It doesn't intrude at all during a normal recording. The mic sounds fine. Okay. We don't want to overplay this, but it's something you should just be aware of. And the other thing is that how many podcasts are recorded in not ideal situations? I mean, I've got everything turned off in the house. I'm back in the basement in the corner. The door's closed upstairs. Everybody upstairs is walking on tiptoes. So,
yeah. I think the other thing I would say is that microphones are a long-term investment. I've got that AKG C414 that I've used on previous shows. I think I've had that microphone for close to 20 years now, and it still works fine, still sounds great. If you can spend the money on it, it's going to last a lot longer than, a lot of other sorts of electronics that you might buy.
Just take good care of it. I think this mic is almost 10 years old. There's nothing wrong with it. I haven't dropped it too much.
Yeah. That was the PodMic update that I wanted to provide. Got the replacement mic. Still, unfortunately, has that hum and buzzing noise. Let's move on to talk about the RØDECaster Pro Firmware 2 updates and the update to the RØDECaster Pro companion amp. The first thing that I think a lot of people were asking for, and I know I noticed it as well, was that when I connected the RØDECaster Pro to my computer using the USB cable, I couldn't access any of the podcast recording WAV files that I recorded on it. I had to eject the micro SD card, get a card reader, insert it into my computer, and then I could copy the files over to my computer.
Yeah.
Now, let's go into the hardware settings. If you go into the micro SD card setting, you can change the mode into podcast transfer mode. And what that basically does is it disables all the other features, so you can no longer use the RØDECaster Pro as an audio interface. You obviously can't be recording on it either, because now essentially it's just acting as a $599 micro SD card reader. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Yes. I was going to say that's a mighty expensive micro SD card reader.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is great to have that capability. The other thing that you could do is that you have this sound playback indicator. So you'll notice that there's a new indicator there on the home screen. Now, if I were to tap on one of these buttons, let's just do our little theme here. See that it sort of lights up, and then it kind of empties like a glass of water to show you how much time is left, and it's even got a countdown timer to show you how many minutes and seconds are left.
I love that. That's cool.
So that's really nice to have, right? Because sometimes you don't know how long you have until the end of your music, or maybe you're playing back an interview. That's just a nice little indicator to have there. The other thing that's nice about that, Bob, is that it acts as a button to access the sound pad settings.
Oh, the pads.
So if you just tap on that on the home screen, now you can see that I'm in the sound pad configuration screen. And if I were to tap on one of these, I can now change a lot of the settings for the pad. So if I wanted to change the color of that to green, I could tap that there and you can see the button change color. If I wanted to change the playback mode, I could do that here from this screen as well. The other thing that they added was a new playback mode, which is called pause. And what that does is, let's say you have a long interview and you wanted to be able to pause it, and maybe you wanted to insert a break in there and then continue it. So you just tap the pad to pause it, tap it again to resume, or you could hold the pad down to cancel that playback completely. That's new here as well.
Yeah.
The other thing, let's go back into the pads here, and you'll notice that I can now have multiple banks of sound pads. Here I have bank 1, and if I were to tap to the right, you can see I've got an empty second bank. You can now actually have up to 8 banks of 8 sound pad files configured.
Okay.
So a total of 64, we can do math here, 64 sounds configured on your RØDECaster. Imagine you have different shows that you do, and maybe you want to be able to have different banks for different podcast shows that you do. But that's a great way to kind of manage those different sound files on the pads.
Okay. I have an amateur radio application for this thing. I'm going to have to buy one of these.
It is very tempting. It's a great little device here. Some of the changes they also made to the RØDECaster Pro under the advanced menu is for audio. So on this screen, you can see that I can automatically mute the output of the monitor outputs. That's this knob over here in the right-hand side. And there's 2 left-right outputs in the back of the RØDECaster Pro, 1/4 inch, which you could feed into a PA system. Maybe it's a control room monitor system, or maybe it's a recording device where you're recording using an external recorder as a backup. So what you can do, let's say you had speakers hooked up, you could automatically mute the outputs of those whenever you bring up the faders on the microphones. That's to prevent feedback, because that can be pretty painful if you have your monitors up and you turn up your mic inputs.
Yeah.
Now the other switch there is to disable the level knob. If you were to accidentally change this, it wouldn't affect the external recorder that you might be using to record, because typically you just want a consistent line level output signal from the RØDECaster in that case, so that the input levels aren't accidentally changed by somebody turning that knob to adjust headphone levels.
Okay.
Now the other change that they made here is the pre-fader listen mode for the channels. What it does is it allows you to talk to a guest through the USB, phone, or Bluetooth input without that conversation going to the recording or going to the outputs of the RØDECaster Pro. So imagine you're bringing in a remote caller, you want to talk to them to let them know that you're about to bring them live. What you can do is this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press the solo and mute button on both the host input channel number 1 and the USB input, which is where Bob is coming in remotely to me. So when I do that, I'll be able to talk to Bob, but you won't be able to hear us because it won't be going to the recording. Let's go ahead and try that now. So you probably didn't hear us there, but we were talking to each other, and you also probably noticed from the level meters that there was nothing being recorded to the RØDECaster Pro or output to the stereo outputs on it. That's just a way for you to talk to remote guests, get them ready for your show, and then bring them in if you're doing a live show so that everything's nice and smooth.
Yeah.
The other change that they've made is they've added the ability to adjust the gain on the USB, phone, and Bluetooth channel. So let me go ahead and go into those channels and show you. So if I go into USB, there's now a level button here, and I can adjust the level up and down. Same thing goes for the phone input. If I were to go into the phone input, there's a level control there, and same thing on Bluetooth. Now the other thing that they changed is the RØDECaster Pro companion app, which is what I have up here. And this is the app that you would traditionally use to load sounds into the sound pads here. You could now use this to access the podcasts in podcast transfer mode. Now the other thing you could do is you could go into the file menu and you could save your show. Now Now what saving your show does is it saves all of the files, including the sounds, the settings, everything, all the setup for your RØDECaster.
Oh, okay.
Imagine if you had different shows that you wanted to do, or if you had multiple RØDECasters and maybe you had them in different rooms, you could save and load shows in between RØDECasters to recall all of your settings, which is really great.
Also as a backup in case it disappears.
That's also true.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do now, which I realized that I lost when I did a factory reset of my device, is that the factory loaded sounds in the sound pads disappeared. Now you can reload those using this file menu setting here. The other thing you can do is that you could save just the settings. So this basically is everything except the sound files that are stored in the sound pads. And you could also just load settings. So if you didn't want to overwrite the sound banks, you could just load the settings. Okay. The other setting that you'll see here is automatically sync time to computer. Bob, this kind of reminds me of those VCRs that flash like 12, right, when it's not set properly. This allows you to automatically set the time of your RØDECaster using the time on your computer, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And the last thing you might have noticed that's different with the RØDECaster Pro companion app is that it supports dark mode now. So if you like working in dark environments or you like darker screens, you've got that going for you.
Good old dark mode.
Yeah. So we hope you enjoyed the update of the RØDECaster Pro review with some of the newer features here, especially in firmware 2. And also the update on the PodMic, where we did an update from our last review just to make sure that that problem wasn't just that one unit. It does seem to be this replacement unit as well with that hum. Thanks again for watching the 3 Techs. Subscribe for more videos. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this one, and let us know in the comments what you thought and ideas for other shows that you might have. See you next time. Thanks for watching.
And push that bell to be told. That's what everybody's doing.
The bell, should I do that version with that?
Yeah, not now.
Okay.